Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the podcast. It has been quite a while since the last episode, I believe 4 years or so. Today, I'm joined with my co host, m2dave. How are you doing, Dave?
I'm doing very well. It's good to be back.
That's awesome to hear. Unfortunately, we did try to reach out to Crimson and Tom, but they couldn't make it because, they have some busy schedules. And on top of that, just to be clear, I don't think there's, too many interesting topics to discuss lately. Because to be fair, it's what 2 years of the new game being released for MK12 being out. So a lot of people are either have kind of already played a lot of MK12, seen what there is to do, and maybe some people have moved on or they're waiting for the next MK game around the corner. Which brings us to this Legacy Kollection, just kind of been the buzz around lately. What is your opinion on that, Dave?
Well, first, let me say it's good to be back doing a podcast with one of my best friends in the FGC. And I know we didn't necessarily end on a good term last time. So, and I do apologize, at least on my behalf for making it too personal. So it's very good to be back and discuss the game instead of engaging in personal attack, which I overdid last time. So I want to focus more on not necessarily, we're just gonna talk positives. I want to talk about, whatever's being discussed, and I was looking at your video about the first video that you uploaded on your main channel, in terms of what this game, obviously referring to multiple games, right? Because it's gonna be a Legacy Kollection, referring to rollback netcode, rank mode, training mode. I kind of want to go into specifics with each one and talk about how it's important. Even if you think these old games are irrelevant, if you think they're jank, I think this topic is still very important to discuss because you guys know from MK12, its first year, had a lot of issues, uh, you know, in relation to the rank mode, the online mode, single player content, etc., right? So I think it's important to stress these topics and urge NRS and WB to do a good job and not just rush this and give us a poor quality product. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, we are kind of going to be, I guess, going for the future, trying to keep the podcast more professional. So let's say there are some disagreements, right? There's a game you happen to like that I don't like. We're going to keep less about insulting the player that enjoys the game, right? Saying the game is garbage or the game is scrubby or all 50/50s, whatever it is. And more so talk about the actual elements of the game and go on from that into something more than kind of like you said, like petty personal arguments. But regarding this Legacy Kollection that's coming out, I'd say, as you mentioned, like I did make a video a few weeks ago on 5 points I feel are extremely important with this collection coming out. And when I say they're very important, when they're releasing something, a project like this, right, they're almost in a way reviving the old Mortal Kombat games because now we're going to be able to play a bunch of them with rollback, which was not possible before. And when it comes to this, the first impressions are going to be very important. They have to get it right. That's why when I made that video, I made sure to mention things like a ranked mode, because if they release this and there's not a proper rank mode, it could have the best netcode in the world, right? The best rollback, and almost no lag. Can play people across the world in perfect condition. If there's not a good rank system, not a good matchmaking system, it's gonna kind of spoil the product, like for us being able to play and enjoy it. Because the last thing I want is for all the players that are coming back to playing these older games or players that are newer that are going to be playing them for the first time. I don't want them to experience what I had to go through when I was learning some of these 2D Mortal Kombat games back in 2006 on Xbox when they released UMK3. That port, not only did it have very bad delay built into it, but the online was not good. When we were playing online, it was a disaster. There wasn't a training mode. So for me to practice, we have to get put into real matches, not knowing anything. And it was just overall a very frustrating experience. But because, back then we weren't used to things like rollback netcode or training modes and that, you kind of had to push yourself to learn a game, even though it was very tedious. And in a way, it kind of made a lot of players leave into wanting it to grow. We had so many players back then during Xbox Live for UMK3. It kind of exploded. There was so many people on the leaderboards. There were, I would say, like hundreds of thousands of people online. And it was pretty big for a few years. And I know after 2006, they released you may have also had this because you were on PS3 during that time. They released Mortal Kombat 2 on PlayStation 3, I believe a year after UMK3. I would have to double check, but I think that was released in 2007, I want to say around that. Did you end up buying that version at all?
No, I don't think I had it, but I heard at least again you're better with the years and stuff. But I remember like one of the versions that they tried to release was like on Xbox Live, but the online was so trash, right?
That was the UMK3 version. I got released 2006. But on PS3, they released the MK2 version, and that one, it's kind of interesting how they did it because Xbox had UMK3 and then PlayStation had MK2. And I remember because I saw a lot of familiar faces playing that. Remember one of our previous co-hosts, Slips, used to play the MK2 version of that with Scorpion. I remember that. 'Cause I ran
Yeah.
into him a few times in that. Like back then, these games were cool because they were releasing them and I was getting into them because during that time I was playing the 3D Mortal Kombat, you know? But I always thought I had the older 2D MK games on consoles, but I never got to play them against people, in a serious matter like I did with the 3D Mortal Kombat's online. So when these were coming out, I obviously was hooked on them and I bought them. I wanted to understand and learn them. I didn't enjoy Mortal Kombat 2 as much as UMK3, not because Mortal Kombat 2 is a bad game or anything. I think the game is good. There's, a lot of skill that goes into winning. It's just less of the style of gameplay that I enjoy compared to UMK3. I like more of the fast-paced, fluid game more than the slower, laid-back gameplay that you see in Mortal Kombat 2. Like you said, the netcode and those two. I know you haven't played them, but you can imagine how bad they were with how they were released in back then at that time when having a very good netcode was not really a thing yet. But they tried to do another arcade project release, and they released that I think during MK9. It was 2011, and it included MK1, MK2, and MK3 with online. And I remember playing that port, which I was kind of excited for because I was like, hey, we're getting a new classic MK port. MK9's coming out, but let's check this out. I remember playing it, and that port was also pretty bad. It had very bad input delay. It had horrible lag. It had a quick match. I don't know if it was ranked, but it had a type of matchmaking with random people where you could play a first to one, and then it would switch. Because back then, NRS games didn't have a very good rank system. They just had first to ones and switch. You remember that during MK9? It had the same thing.
Yes, I do. Um, and I think it most of the people probably watching this podcast, obviously they probably played MK12 to some extent, including you, right? The first 2-3 weeks, and we know what the game's problems were. We just cannot have those problems again ever. This is not, it's not like, oh my god, I hate the camera system. This is not about the meta and its gameplay. It's just like very basic stuff that's almost entirely objective, right? When you buy a modern fighting game, what's important? Well, you probably care about the online gameplay. You want it to be smooth. You want there to be a good matchmaking system, like Rio just said. You want there to be, maybe some kind of online training mode. That's a type of stuff that essentially dug a big hole for MK12, and probably the reason why the game didn't sell as much as it could have, and the reason maybe the scene could have been bigger than what it is right now. And I by the way, I still enjoyed the game. I'm still playing it, but I think it's very, very important that when this Legacy Collection gets released, or even the next Mortal Kombat in maybe 2-3 years, that we have these features that are so important to modern fighting games that they cannot be released without them.
Yes, I agree. I did play MK12 for the first few weeks to get into it, but I had it for PC, so I don't know if console had these issues. I guess you can comment on that. Because on PC, there were a lot of problems. Like, I remember trying to play Detroit. We would play together. On PC, I was playing with Detroit, Smoke, and Super Bowl, a lot of other players. And an issue was every time we tried to play each other, the game would desync after one game, and we would have to leave and reconnect, and then we would try doing private lobbies. And when we would accept and join after the intro, it would desync, and then we were like, "Well, how are we going to play each other?" And then I forgot who it was. I think it was Soup that figured it out. You had to make a King of the Hill match, invite somebody one on one on PC, and then not skip the intro, and then play a game, and then after it would bug out and the game would crash. We'd have to keep doing that. So this was kind of ridiculous, for a AAA game to release in the state on PC. Aside from that huge hurdle, I remember when I wasn't playing with them, I was trying to play Kombat League a bit just to learn some of the game. It was kind of the same issue on, in playing people online. There was issues with sometimes the game crashing or whatnot. I don't want to really get into the technicals of the game. I didn't enjoy in terms of gameplay because we're not really talking about that. But yeah, I would agree. So like first impressions are very important. If they release this collection, these games, they got to make sure it's tested properly and it works. You cannot have people inviting their friends on PC and then having the game desync and crash repeatedly for like a month or so, because that's going to turn off a lot of people.
Yeah, to say the least. And even after you had quit, there was a I don't know when this was exactly. It was probably like during winter time, at least in the US. It was maybe from I don't know, from like October to November. I don't remember exactly, but maybe autumn/winter time. There was like a month where the game was just literally like unplayable online. Like you said, it would just desync nonstop. And randomly too. You would play a match and it was fine, then another match it's just like, it just stopped. And you have to restart the game or whatever. It was very, very strange. And we can't, like you said, first impressions matter, and we just cannot have that stuff. Irrespective of the fact how you feel about this game, right? Again, this is super objective. We can all agree that the online should be playable. But I want to go into a bit more details. Like, obviously, we need to have rollback netcode, again, which you discussed. I think there should be a rank mode. So if I'm playing Ultimate, I don't want to go in and fight you because you used to play the game a lot, or run into shock, and then because you guys been playing the game for a long time. Obviously, I'm at a low level if I want to play, so I should not be running into players who are much better. So you definitely need a rank mode. I think training mode is a little bit trickier because that may include like actually like adding content for like an older game. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's a little bit trickier, but I think it should definitely have it because if it doesn't, because we can all kind of agree, even somebody like me, again, I like the newer games probably more than you do, but I think we would all agree that maybe some of the older games are a little bit more difficult to play. So if I'm trying to learn Reptile's combos, right? In Ultimate, I know it's easier on male ninjas to do that, that jab combo, but it's a little bit more difficult to do it on the females. That's something I have to practice, but I don't want to do that during a match because I don't want to get my ass kicked. So, how do you feel like adding a training mode? Maybe that's a little bit more controversial, is it not?
Well, to touch on MK12 really quickly before I go into that, one thing I was disappointed about when I was about to play MK12 is I was hoping that one thing they learned going from MK11 to MK12 is that they were going to have a training mode available while searching for an opponent. I was very surprised and shocked to not see that in, because I was assuming, because I made videos about this during MK11 saying, one thing we need is it's not fun to play Kombat League in MK11 and for minutes or whatever on stream, you're just staring at the little circle spinning, saying waiting for opponent with nothing to do. It's so outdated. All of these games now give you the ability the training mode while searching. I mean, did Street Fighter 4 have that? I know Tekken 7 did. So it's not like it's something that just came out with these new games, right? It's been here for quite a few years now. So for this Legacy Collection, I don't know if they're going to do this, right? They may save that for MK13, I'm assuming. But it would be awesome if they can somehow program that into these games where if we're searching for rank, we can practice. That way, there's never a dull moment, right? You're in the game. There's always something for you to do. And to touch on UMK3, that's a game you're going to be in training mode a lot because there's so many things to practice in that game. Like you said, you mentioned Reptile. Well, not only do you have to learn how to do Reptile combos on specific characters in your B&Bs, but then you're going to have to learn all the different variants and specific changes you have to do and on the entire cast. Like the way you do it on female ninjas is different from male ninjas. Then you have to do it differently on, Shang and Cabal and so on. So it's stuff you're going to be able to want to practice because the last thing you want to do is get into a ranked match, play against someone, and the entire time you're not even trying to play them for ranked. You're just going like, how do I do my combo? How do I do this? So that is pretty essential to add. And obviously they have to have a matchmaking system, right? Like you said, you don't want to go first match you play against like Mr. I Got Base from MK3. He's been playing the game for 19 years straight, and he just steamrolls you. Because not only is he not going to have fun, but then you're going to be like, what is this? Like, I can't even do anything. I want to practice. So, will they add a training mode? Maybe. They should, though, if they want this to explode and be very well received online. And I don't think they'll add a way to match make while training mode because I feel like if the current biggest NRS title they have out right now doesn't have that, they're probably not going to have it in this, but maybe, or I should say, hopefully MK13 has that because it kind of needs it at this point.
Yeah, and I know people might be listening to this, be like, oh, I can't believe these two old people, complaining about the stuff about 25, 30-year-old plus games. It's like, guys, but remember, some stuff paves the way for the future. Do you want to have some of these features in your next Mortal Kombat game, in your next Injustice game? Then you need to speak out and, not harass the developers on Twitter, which is completely inappropriate, but in a polite manner express, okay, this is what we need because your last game didn't have this. Can we please have this? And I think it's perfectly reasonable, especially we don't know what the cost's going to be. And I'll probably tell you, probably ain't going to be cheap, right? To respectfully demand these features that a lot of these other fighting games currently have. Because I'm telling you, if the online gameplay is bad for this Legacy Collection, the game is going to be a complete disaster. It's going to be a failure. You guys are not going to have fun, even if you are, just trying to get off, like casually playing. Because if your matches keep disconnecting as they did, at some point during MK12, it's going to be a very frustrating gameplay experience.
Yeah, and regarding MK12, because I've heard people say like MK12 didn't sell well or whatever in the beginning, or it didn't have traction. The thing is, MK12 was actually doing very good in the beginning. Like the first few weeks, first few months, it was beating out MKX, beating out MK11 a lot. I remember on my Steam friend list, I was like, wow, I have like 200 people on my Steam friend list, and so many of them had MK12. I'm like, wow, there's so many people on this game right now. What I noticed is after a few weeks, barely most of them were even on the game anymore. It was probably 1/10 of what was on. So it was a huge drop off, which I guess bad word went around, and then the game started losing, a lot of sales it could have had if it had a lot better launch. But going back to the 2D MKs, a funny story is one of the reasons why I picked Nightwolf as one of my mains to learn UK3 in it was because the netcode was so bad. So I was looking for like an easy to play character where I wouldn't have to practice mode. So the character I decided learning UMK3 with as my first main was Nightwolf because he's the easiest top tier to use in that game. He's got a simple auto combo, does a lot of damage. He can just end in shoulder, doing a hatchet, just simple combo for good damage. His game plan is very simple. You just mash out shoulders, which is good in lag because it's an easy input to do. And the shoulder will want to get people to duck because it's safe-ish on block. Only like a couple characters can punish it, and it's a fast move. So the way to counter his shoulder is you have to neutral duck. And because he has a good mid where he can run up to you, he can hit you. So he had a very simple game plan. That's why I went to that character to learn UP3 with, because there was no training mode, because the netcode was bad like that back then. And I think that's a bad way to learn a game. Trying to make yourself learn a game in the easiest, scrubbiest way possible because the game just it's available but doesn't have the tools to either function properly with the online or doesn't have something like a training mode. So like I said, hopefully they hit this out of the park with this new game that they're putting out, and it has things like a training mode at the very least, even though they may not have searching while training. And the matchmaking, I can't stress this enough. It's so important. You have to be able to play people, other beginners around your level, move your way up. You do not want to get random people searching, playing against random people, because then the people that are good at the game are going to get bored playing the people that they're steamrolling, and then the people that are getting steamrolled are going to two things are going to happen. They're either going to end up quitting, or they're going to end up bad mouthing the game, saying this game is dumb. And that will sort of ramming shoulders or it's scrubby, and then that's going to have bad word go around and circulate, and then that'll probably kind of dampen the massive hype that could have been around the game for the next few years when people start dropping it.
No, absolutely. And but I know we keep kind of switching a little bit of topics. I'm not this guy, who beats a dead horse and thinks MK12 is this trash game. Because by the way, I still play it. I know you don't anymore, which is fine. But I think the gameplay is one of the best that I've ever seen NRS do. It's also a very well polished game in terms of just the way the game looks like, the way the game the balance of the game, the just the character variety. I think it's very, very good, and I like a lot of the gameplay features of the game. But again, we want to make sure that the mistakes from the first year are not repeated in future games, legacy or otherwise. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a huge Fightcade guy, but there is a practice mode for that, right? For any game that's on Fightcade, there's a practice mode, including for Ultimate MK2. Is that correct?
Yes, if you go on Fightcade, there's I believe the game has to have ranked. I could be wrong on this, but if the game has like a rank, like for Third Strike, MK3, so on, there's an option to click training, and then it puts you in the game. And when you go to versus or whatever, they have full HP, their health doesn't drain, and the time doesn't go down. So you have a way to practice combos and try to get the feel for the game. Really quickly to go on what you were saying, because you said I played MK12 but didn't end up enjoying it. I'd say I played MK12 the first few weeks, then I kind of moved on. But I feel like I didn't give the game a fair shot because obviously you should probably play a game for a few more weeks, right? I didn't get to see what the patches and changes they did after that. But the thing was, back then during MK11, when they announced that they were no longer supporting MK11, I was assuming that, well, I guess NRS is releasing the next game, right? Like they usually do every 2 years. So because they ended up not releasing it, and it was such like a long downtime. It was like 4 years since MK11 for this game, right?
Yeah.
During that downtime, while I was waiting, I ended up getting into other games like Counter-Strike, which way ended up becoming my main game because Counter-Strike 2 ended up coming out. I got into that game, and as someone who doesn't play shooting games, it was kind of awkward for me to adjust to, but I ended up really liking that game and enjoying it. And the fact that the game, it's kind of crazy when you go from playing fighting games to playing another game like that, seeing how the game is made in a way where it's like accessible for people to try, but then there's so much into it, so much depth, so much things to learn that kind of go over your head if you're just playing the game for the first time. Like there's so many little things you don't notice. And after getting into Counter-Strike 2 a lot, I played that game a lot for like a year. I was enjoying it. I loved playing Premiere and the ranked modes and all that. My PC ended up dying, so last time I played Counter-Strike was like 8 months ago because my PC, so I kind of whatever. During that time when I got back into MK12, when it got released, I was expecting a lot because I was like, wow, this is NRS's first time having 4 years to make a game now, They're not stuck in this 2-year cycle where they only have 2 years to try to develop something and push it out. Now they have more time to work on the game. So this game is probably going to be twice as good as any previous game on release. Well, I was wrong on that. And I'm not just talking about the desync issues and stuff. I'm talking about when I played the gameplay, I was shocked to see that for some reason the gameplay was slower than MK11. And MK11 wasn't even a fast game. It was on the slower side because MK11 was slower than MKX. So I was very surprised to see MK12 gameplay. What it felt like to me was slower. The movement felt a little bit slower. The block dashing felt very controlled and limited. Like they wanted you to use it to move quicker, but not too fast. They had like a control on it. And a lot of the characters' movesets, like the character I ended up maining in the beginning, my first team was Havoc and Darius. That was my team. Kind of like my 3D MK team from MK Deception, which for you guys that don't know, MK Deception is my favorite Mortal Kombat game. Not for gameplay, I just mean in general. The game that when I think Mortal Kombat, I go to Deception because to me that's the coolest Mortal Kombat game that they've ever created in terms of like I had the music was amazing, love the character designs, I love the modes in the game, everything. So for MK12, I decided to go with a throwback team to Deception, being Havoc and Darius. And when I played Havoc, he was so different from Deception. He didn't have a lot of his similar moves. He had so many different attacks. Darius felt almost like he was designed with no nod at Deception whatsoever. Like all of his attacks that he had, not a single one I remember even being in Deception. He didn't have his iconic Nutbuster, his iconic low nut punch 50-50. He didn't have his Gauntlet 3 launcher. He didn't have his backbreaker throw, all those stuff. He had like these different moves. He had like an axe kick, and you can spin him around, which I guess that's a little nod to his sax twist kick. And he didn't have his tricky shot. He just felt he was supposed to be Darius, but designed in a different way. Where I guess he wasn't supposed to be Darius. He was supposed to be like I guess a revision of the character, similar with Havoc. Havoc had these like neoplasma projectiles, which are kind of cool, but I feel like they didn't really fit the character. And then he had a roll attack instead of his. I thought his corpse dive was a lot cooler in Deception. They should have brought that back instead of having a generic roll where he comes in and grabs you. And I know if you meet a brand that gives you that he can set up his neck breaker and blockable, where he doesn't heal off. It does entirely different stuff. That I think was the most comparable thing to Deception, but the entire rest of his moveset was just completely new. It felt like they wanted to bring the characters back, but have least amount of moves compared to what they had back then. So, he had Havoc without his blue skull projectile, no corpse dive, no him splitting himself in half to heal himself. Same thing with Darius, no 50-50 nut punch attacks, no tricky shot, none of his iconic good moves in Deception. And I guess you could say maybe the people that developed this game weren't around to play Deception, or they didn't like the game, because that game was, over 20 years ago at this point?
Yeah, I'm so happy you're talking about this because you have no idea how much people have asked for you and your opinions. Because obviously you guys know, when REO was missing in action, I was doing a podcast with Tom. A couple of times I showed up on Mike Hollow's channel. And recently I've been doing some stuff with King Jr., aka Burrito Voorhees. Please check out his channel on YouTube. But always the number one question was, where's REO? Why isn't he playing? What does he think, right? What does he think about MK12? What does he think about the current FGC, and stuff like that? So I'm very, very happy you're talking about this. Obviously, you and I talk a lot privately, and which is one of the reasons I consider you one of my best friends in the FGC, if not the best. So I'm very happy you're talking about this because a lot of people have been wondering. And I think maybe you're being a little bit too nice because obviously whoever designed Darius in this game probably didn't spend a minute, playing Darius or even playing MK Deception ever in their life. So it was very disappointing, because I just in general I like the name Darius. It's just kind of sounds cool, and I like the character. And then you kind of play him. It's like, wait, what? Like, what is this? Like, this character has nothing to do with the Darius that we, got to know. Lord knows how many years ago, in Deception. So it was a very disappointing design. And to this day, like, he's kind of like a low tier cameo anyway. That's not really used all that much. They did kind of buff him. I believe he gives you the most health now, if I'm not mistaken. But again, the fact that I played a game and I'm still not sure what the design is a little bit disappointing. He should have been one of the very, very few like 50-50 mix-up characters, right? Because he is from Deception and the game is kind of known for that. So yeah, it's a little bit disappointing, the way he turned out, to say the least.
Yeah, because I mean his whole game plan in Deception was to abuse his 50-50s and throw you. But it's not a knock at saying I don't like the 3D M cases. I love the 3D Mortal Kombat. It's just when you bring back a character from the past and you have people excited that grew up playing in the past, playing games like Deception. I mean, I played the game for 2 years straight on my line. I was on that game online every day for 2 years straight, enjoying the hell out of it. When you bring a character like that back from the past, it's almost like, well, who are these characters for? Because we need to design them so differently. I guess they're not for the people back then that like nostalgia, right? Because they're completely different. The only thing Darius shares from the Darius in Deception is his name. Everything else is completely different. But, when I was playing with Havoc, I realized I was playing Detroit, and Detroit was playing Shang and Kung Lao. I'm like, man, your cameo seems annoying. You have your hat like every 5 seconds. I'm using Darius like every 20 seconds. So I was like, maybe I should try somebody else. So I ended up going to another 3D character I enjoyed, Serena. And I was like, let me go to Serena. She's probably going to have really good zoning, because you played in Armageddon. She had one of the best projectiles that she could use. She had a skull basher attack and other moves. And I play Serena. I'm like, wow, Serena is quite different from Armageddon. She does have a good projectile, but it's more like a Jade boomerang projectile. It's not how Serena was in Armageddon at all. Because what Serena was known for is throwing these quick daggers with quick recovery. So I was assuming that she would have access to like a quick fire projectile that maybe takes like a quarter or half of one cameo bar. So you could use them up to like 4 times if you want to deplete your whole bar. Something like that would have been cool. But she doesn't. She has like a boomerang combo thing, which she throws 2 of her sickle mini blades, and then it's kind of like Jade where it comes back and you get a combo after. So that move felt more like Jade. And then she has this like Quan Chi spell where you're in the thing and it drains your meter. I'm like, what even is this? Like, I don't even remember Serena having any of this. like I said, it's not a knock on it, for them to, I guess, redesign characters. It's just, for me, it lessened the hype because when I see some characters in these new games brought back that I used to play back in the day, and then seeing them be so different that at this point you could call Serena or Darius a different character with their gameplay, and it honestly wouldn't even matter. They wouldn't be losing much because, I mean, the character plays nothing like Serena does in Armageddon. Darius has nothing from Deception, you know? So if you were to change into other names, nobody would know because we wouldn't be able to recognize them because out of their gameplay, aside from their name, we can't tell if that's Serena or Darius if you played games in the past. But yeah, to get
Yeah,
onto the some more of the gameplay, because I don't want to just sound like I'm talking about looks and nostalgia.
yeah,
Regarding MK12, the movement was one of the biggest things I didn't enjoy. Just having the game be, I was hoping they would make the game be more snappy and fluid. Kind of take the good movement characters from MK11, like Rain, Melina, Fujin, etc., and have them be as a base from K12, so you can move quicker. But what they kind of did was they kind of, I guess, like I said, I'm not sure if this was a Havoc issue only, or maybe some characters had good movement. Like I'm guessing Johnny had better movement, but Havoc, his block dash felt very clunky. We would move to it. It felt like the way that they wanted to be in the game was they wanted you to move a little bit quicker, but not too smooth. It's like they didn't want you to play too much of a fast paced style. They want you to have a form of block dashing, but for it to not be so freestyle where you can move freely with it. Which to me, I feel like that's limiting the game and making it feel less enjoyable to play. And regarding some of the depth and combos on characters, again, this maybe was a Havoc issue, but when I was playing Havoc and learning his combos, I was only in training mode for like a couple days, and I never went back to training mode because I learned his main BMVs. You could do like a back 2-2, back forward 1 plasma launcher, then back 2-2 corpse spin for your basic combo. And then after I learned the combos with Darius and Serena, I was like, you know what, let me just play Cyrax because I feel like this character gives Havoc pressure, gives him combos. Now I can combo off both of my throws with Cyrax Helicopter. Now I can do back 2-2 and either pressure and go into jailing corpse spin or confirm and go into other like throw setups, or I can do back 2-2 4-ender low, launch him off that. I can hit people with his back 4-2 roll under a projectile. And when I hit them, I could call Sox to get a combo off that. So it was like, well, there's no reason for me to use other cameos, but this one, I can get a combo off basically everything. I can start pressure off everything. I could, chip people out with this. So I settled on Sarx and I was playing him for a couple of weeks before I started losing interest in the game. And I remember playing Detroit. There was so many like hard to blockables and he was playing Shang. He would end the combo.
there still is.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming this was a Kung Lao thing because Kung Lao had a low hat. What Detroit would do is he would do a combo and knock me down, and then it would be give him enough advantage where I would have to get ready to block a low hat cameo assist coming at me while he was doing a jump in, and that was like repeatedly rinse and over and over. And I was like, this kind of feels like I'm playing MPX again. Like I was expecting to play something new and interesting, but it feels like okay, it's just a lot of harder blockables and 50-50s. Okay, whatever. Then he would be hitting me with combos, and the combos were so long and exaggerated. I was like, Detroit, how hard is it to do this combo? He was doing a Shane combo with me up there for BB, and I'm not even joking. Like I'm being serious here. The combos were like 20 seconds long. He would do whatever combo, morph, combo launch, and then do fireball, and he has me in the air doing like far fireball, mid fireball, close fireball, mid fireball, far fireball, close, EX, and I'm like, wow, this is doing barely any damage. You're doing all of this 20-second long combo for just 40%. And I guess you're building meter. I'm like, Detroit, is this hard to do at all? Like, is it at least involving for you? I know I'm just here watching this for 20 seconds, but are you? And he's like, no, it's not really hard to do. It's easy. So he's wasn't really having fun doing this, even though it's very long, which is, I guess they were trying to make flashy combos. But the thing is, to make combos exciting, they have to make combos difficult to do, right? If you make combos easy and long, it just makes the game kind of feel repetitive and boring in a way, even though you would think because the game has a long, flashy combo, it's supposed to be automatic hype. And it was kind of cool when I saw it the first match from the Detroit Zone. I'm like, wow, that was a long, really, like a really long, crazy combo. But then I kept seeing it every round for like the next hour. And I was like, Jesus, this combo is just, I think I'm sick of seeing this. When I was playing other people, like in Super Bowl, and he was playing Baraka at that time, and I was like, ooh, let me see what Baraka does in this game. In MK11, he was kind of, whatever. Playing him and everything is down one, chop, chop, down one, call Cyrex assist, come in, string, chip, 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 Cyrex assist. I'm like, okay, well, I guess they made Baraka like an Unga Bunga, just offense repeat character. And Soup was laughing because he's like, yeah, this character is like so easy to play in this and that. I'm like, well, okay, so maybe it's not only my character that's not as interesting and hyped to play. So then, I'm like, let me play Combat League. Maybe I just got unlucky playing hard to blockable Shang and playing Unga Bunga, just mash strings and plus all day on block Baraka. So I get to Combat League and I'm playing people. And, I go up against Raiden and I'm like, okay, what does Raiden do in this game? In MK11, he was kind of weak. Round one, fight Combat League. Down one, down one, down one, shocker, down one, shocker, down one, shocker, assist, down. I'm like, dude, is this entire character just down one into special, into call assist, down one? If the hits, you get a combo. I'm like, I don't know how we went from. I know you didn't like MK11, but how we went from MK11, which already had a lot of complaining about pokes and down ones, and now I'm playing MK12, and it feels like they ramped up the poking. Where now, like the mind game was, oh, if you try to press a button after my down one, I'm gonna do down one special and combo you. But if you guess that right, I'm gonna meter burn it, and then I'm gonna come in and down one and throw you again. And it's just like they they overblown the issue so much. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's just Raiden. So I played some more Combat League, playing other characters. And I remember running into Tanya player, and I'm like, what does Tanya do in this game? I wonder how they, she looks so cool and interesting and unique. Round one, fight, get next to her, armor, down one, armor, repeated armor. I'm like, dude. So this game, basically, for what it felt like for me, we waited 4 years for this game to come out. I don't know why I went into it thinking it was going to be this amazing stuff because they had 4 years to create it. I was expecting to sit down and have my mind blown for them having so much time to create this game. I was not expecting to see Down One City, Armor Party, again, 50-50 Heaven, and Unga Bunga Mash. It felt like they took a lot of the things that were not enjoyable from previous games, the armor from MK9, the Mash poking from MK11, the obnoxious 50-50 hard blockers from MKX, and they crammed it all into MK12. This to me was kind of why, after playing for like a few weeks, I was like, you know what? Man, my computer's kind of crap. Do I really want to invest and buy an entire computer when I don't really enjoy this game right now? Like, there's nothing really I'm playing. So after that, I just went back to playing Counter-Strike, really. Because at that point, I was so into Counter-Strike, and I was playing, having fun learning the game, leveling up, that I just kind of lost interest. And I was like, no, I guess I'll just wait for the next game. That's when they released this Legacy Kollection. I'm like, oh, this is hype. I remember me, you, and Tom were talking a few weeks ago, like a day after it got announced, right? Like, this is sick. They're bringing all these older MK games back. We're going to have GGPO now. What if they get to the 3D era, right? Then after, if this is a huge success, then they'll be able to do MKDA online, Armageddon, Deception, MK vs. DC, maybe even MK9 when they get that. Like, this is going to be awesome. Because now, if we're stuck with a current interest game where we may not enjoy as much as I wasn't a big fan of like Injustice 1 or Injustice 2, I did like MK11 a lot more than Injustice 1, 2, and MKX. Because that game, to me, it was fun grinding Combat League in MK11. And that was one of the cool things I enjoyed about that game. So one thing I want to see them take from MK11 is to bring back the Kombat League for this Legacy Kollection. First of threes ranked with seasonal rewards, or just have all these ranks you could gather up to, like Elder God, and maybe expand on it so there's more than just 8 ranks. But to me, like, when it comes to MK12 now, obviously I'm not talking about how MK12 is now, right? I don't know how the game is now. Maybe they fixed all that. Maybe MK12 isn't just armor the game and down one special or Unga Bunga. Like, because what I'm talking about, I want to make sure people know this. I'm talking about month 1 MK12 when I got into. This could all change. Like, Havoc is probably a better character now. Darius is probably,
Let me say this, because they did nerf like a lot of the down one specials, like the Raiden stuff. He's like mid tier now. They did nerf some of the Baraka stuff, and obviously Cyrax, right? Because the first 2 months of the game or so, it was essentially all, helicopter. So they did nerf a lot of that. And the game, at least in my opinion, is a lot more enjoyable. They did buff Havoc, maybe in ways you probably wouldn't like, though. So, like now he does because he has a lot of overhead. So
wait, let me guess before you tell me. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Let me guess. Fine. The way they buffed him, did they give him, I guess, maybe new 50-50s or new combos that go into big damage?
Yeah, essentially. So essentially, he does a lot more damage, especially with Mavado, which is a cameo you obviously probably didn't play because you quit too early. And then he has like this essentially like low swipe. which launches. To be fair to them, like if you do it as a wake up as an EX, then it doesn't launch, but it obviously has armor. So I know it was probably buffed in ways that you probably wouldn't appreciate. Um, Nonetheless, I'm glad you're talking about this because I think like a lot of these modern games kind of play similar. And I'm not saying if you're good at MK now you're gonna go to Tekken, you're gonna beat Knee, right? But even Tekken like has arguably maybe the longest combos ever, aside from maybe Tekken Tag 2. So does Street Fighter 6 probably, if you consider like the drive rush into normal and then you can drive rush again, I mean you guys know, right? So I think a lot of these uh, modern games kind of play similar in certain aspects, and I think the biggest difference is that for the first time in ever, how the game is perceived visually in terms of like, if I'm a casual player or even like an intermediate player, when we watch, that is incredibly important because we are, potential customers if we don't have the game already, of course. And how we perceive the game is very, very important to obviously Harada, Ed Boon, et cetera, right? So I think that's really the difference. And I think at least from, I'm just, I'm just, it's a conjecture, but I'm speculating that it's very, very important for casual gamers to have some kind of, oh, look, he just did a huge combo and he came in and then this other guy just did armor. Oh my God. Like it's supposed to have this, it's supposed to play out, like you say, kind of like almost like a movie, right? Because like very cinematic in nature. And I think that's very important in this modern day and age. By the way, I'm not necessarily justifying it. I'm just from a from an observational point of view, from an observational perspective, kind of documenting the way these games are played nowadays and what's important.
Yeah, I would agree on what you said regarding the different change and how fighting games have kind of developed a certain meta where they kind of favor. But the reason why I didn't want to talk about MK12 or really dive into it in this episode, well, I guess it's too late for that, is because I mean, I didn't really play MK12 that long. I only played it for like basically a month. So, I mean, who really wants to hear someone's opinion on a game from 2 years ago that doesn't even play the same way it is now? I mean, I guess aside from the gameplay not being too enjoyable for me personally, I'm not saying it was bad because I'm sure a lot of people enjoyed the armor with Tanya and the harder blockers with Kung Lao and the Baraka Unga Bunga. I'm sure some people to them was enjoyable. For me, it wasn't. But aside from that, one thing I like when it comes to unrest games is it's fun to explore when they introduce a new game and they always have new mechanics to mess around with. New mechanics that you've never seen before, really. And one thing about MK12 is I was a bit disappointed how there wasn't a lot of new stuff to mess around with. Like, yes, they brought back Floss Block, but we already kind of knew how to do it in MK11, right? It's not like just they put it in the game. We're like, oh, what's this? What's this mechanic? We kind of already understand how Floss Block works. And then they kind of stripped it in ways where they redesigned it so that I did like how they make it so you have to floss block every hit now instead of you only floss blocking the first hit, and then in MK11 it makes everything else be like all automatic floss block. I think that was bad. So the way they did it in MK12 where you have to actually floss block every separate hit for it to count is good. They did remove the follow-ups of floss block in MK11, which I mean, okay, I guess you could say they wanted it to be for you to have less options out of it, which is fair. But in reality, when you look at some of the new mechanics they brought back, it's kind of like they've reworked previous mechanics for them to not feel completely brand new. For example, when you do the up block, right, which you can do in MK12, I remember like there was a way you could. Baraka had this jump up overhead launcher, and I remember with Havoc, if you false blocked it, it would make it unsafe and punishable, things like that. But to me, when I look at up block, it's not really a new mechanic to me. When I look at it, it looks like a repurposed floss block where you make something unsafe or launch them after. But instead of you having to execute the false block, you just tap up. So it's kind of like an easier, more straightforward, just tap up. And this essentially gives you a combo after blocking a certain move with no meter required. Whereas in MK11, you would have to false block something and then execute the up two quickly so you get the launch and then come off, some of your meter, so to me, up two didn't feel like a brand new mechanic. It just feels like a repurposed false block launcher component that they removed the false block and made it separate thing. And then the another new mechanic they had in MK12 is the down two launcher, And this to me again seems like the crush and glow mechanic in MK11 off the down two. But instead of it being automated where you get to do it once per round, you launch them, cutscene, and you get a combo, now they made it so instead of it being free and automated, you have to use your meter to do that. And there's no cutscene, and you can do as much as you want at cost of meter, whereas in MK11 you can only do it once. So you can say that the down two launcher is kind of like the down two questionable from MK11. The up block is kind of like the false block launcher from MK11. What else? Other new mechanics? Oh yeah, and then they had the fatal blow that they brought back, which I'm surprised because fatal blow was probably the one thing I don't think anybody liked in MK11. I certainly didn't because it's basically an armor launcher you get for free just for getting your butt kicked in the game. So I don't know why they brought back, but they did nerf it by giving it a freeze frame like Injustice. That was good. I don't understand why they would have that over something like an X-ray. I feel like X-ray was always the better way to do like a devastating blow attack instead of having just a fatal blow be given to you. And I really hope for MK13 they do away with the fatal blow and just get rid of it and bring back the X-ray where you have access to a devastating powerful move, but you have to build up to it and it'll cost all your resource to use.
Yeah, I think you make good points, and I think we're kind of digging into the more subjectivity, right? Matter. For example, if you listen to Tom, one of his talking points is, and by the way, it's not just Tom. I'm using Tom as an example just because he's also one of my closest, friends in the FGC. Like legacy is very, very important to him. So most of the gameplay aspects in MK12 are legacy in nature, right? The wake up is very similar to MKX. Armor is more like MKX. Combos are long, right? Even longer than MKX. But there's, it's essentially the same, right? MK11 was very different with combos. It was a breakaway. Obviously, combo breaker, right? That goes back to MK9. Uh, but I feel like that's what a lot of the community wanted. And essentially, everything is more or less legacy aside from the main mechanic in the game, which is the cameo system. I would argue that's a good thing because a lot of the mechanics that were in MK11, I know you like the game. I didn't. We don't want to go back in the past and uh, reiterate all those boring talking points. But I think in general, I think it's perceived that the mechanics in MK11 are not very well liked, even by the players who enjoy playing the game, or at least they're very polemic, right? They're very controversial. They're very polarized. I think that's a fair assessment. I'm sure you would agree. So NRS took the stuff that people generally, not everybody, liked from the older games. So I was like, look, here's the older stuff. I know they were not everybody, but they were like generally well received, unlike the universal mechanics in MK11, which a lot of people couldn't they couldn't stand. So, and they added the cameo system, which obviously is super controversial as well. But again, if you look at the wake up system, the combo system, the combo breaker system, all that stuff is kind of legacy. And I think that's what a lot of people like Tom, especially some of the older players, were asking for. Am I being fair when I say that, or because I don't want to represent people's view, but I think in general, I think that was the case.
Yeah, that's a fair point. To say MK12 is more legacy based. Well, it really depends on how you want the game to play because I guess it's up to how much you enjoy a previous game. Like I know if they do a legacy MKX, it would be huge for a lot of people. But for me, as someone who's not a big fan of repetitive 50/50s over and over, I wouldn't enjoy that kind of legacy. I would rather than take legacy in other areas. But with MK12, in a way, you're right. They did take false block from MK11. They just reworked it a bit, which is legacy, you could say. And then the cameos are kind of like the variation system, but instead of it being a pool that's unique per character, it's a pool available to every character in the game to select. So you can choose, like, in a way, a variation that gives you other moves that you can use as assist and access to certain attacks or combos you wouldn't be able to do normally. But to me, I would say I really would want them for MK13 maybe steer away from any of the customization in terms of selecting a variation or selecting a cameo. Because that's one thing MKX started. Is MKX started the whole variation and choose a part of your character that you want to alter. I was never a huge fan of that, and I'm hoping for MK13 they kind of drop the whole, selecting a variation or customizable stuff and just go into something different. I'd rather see if they want to have something that you choose a character and you have access to these different attacks one at a time, then I'd say bring back the 3D MK stance switches that you could do in game. So that way you could have a defensive stance, you could have an offensive stance, you get a weapon stance for footsies, stuff like that. That way, when you play a character, you can specialize in one stance, but at the very least, you'll have access to everything on the character in the game, right? So you'll see certain people playing different styles. Like you'll see a Sub-Zero playing more of a defensive style. You'll see another Sub-Zero playing the offensive stance more in a match and being aggressive. Then you'll see even another Sub-Zero playing more of the footsie stance, and then maybe we'll see other Sub-Zero players that can incorporate all three of them at the perfect times, right? Those will be the players that can be very good when they know most of their character in the game. What do you think about that?
Actually, I love that. You guys will be surprised when you talk to, to FGC members. Ask them, what do you want in a game? You will be surprised how people have different perspectives as far as like how a fighting game should play, right? And trust me, Rio and I have gotten in so many shouting fests privately about what should be in a game, what shouldn't. But this is one thing I 100% agree on. No more gimmicks, no more variation systems, no more custom moves, no more cameo systems. Give us quote unquote complete characters. Dude, it's been so long since I like played some of these older games. I completely forgot that even they had stances, right? Like Deception, Armageddon. Well, I think Deception had 3, right? And Armageddon had 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
So that would be a great way to incorporate more strings, more special moves, etc., etc. I'm 100% on board with that. I agree with you also 100% that the cameo system is essentially a variation system, but for all the characters, right? And I think enough is enough. I think people want to play one character. Give us more moves, give us all this stuff, but no more of of these gimmicks.
yeah, and like you said, the whole thing for being have legacy, but I understand they want to keep having some of MKX brought back, right? Like MKX started the whole choose a piece of your character or choose something, bring it to battle. You can't have all of it, just choose some of it. I understand they want to keep bringing that back, but in my opinion, why not bring the things that maybe MKX did better instead of that? Like, for example, they even have elements from MK9 that they brought. The throw 50/50 was from MK9. And I'm not a fan of that. I wish they could have brought other things that weren't that. They even brought the armor from MK9, It's like they kind of choose two of the things that weren't as well received and enjoyable. Like, because I never remember MK9 being praised for their armor or being praised for the 50 throw system, those are two things they took and still keep adding to their new games today. So it'd be interesting if they could maybe start mixing it up a bit, maybe add a whole new throw system in the next game instead of having this throw system that we've had since MK9 now for like 15 years, and maybe get rid of this customizable system that we've had now for like over 10 years from MPX, do something new instead of that. If they bring back the stances, what they could do is they don't have to have every stance be offensive, defense, or footsies, right? They can mix and match. They can make characters play differently. But the thing is, when you look at some of these past old games, you don't have to make a game play, exactly how the older games did. You can take elements that were unique or interesting that other games didn't do that MK did, like the stance stuff, or like even from the older MK games, how throws used to work in some of the 2D Mortal Kombat's. The way throws worked in those games is not how throws work in any newer games or any other fighting games. They're very unique to Mortal Kombat. So what I'm hoping is when they do get to MK13, is they start really looking back all the way from the original MK1 through past all the other 2D MKs, through all the 3D MKs, even some of the NRS games, and take specifically things that worked, things that were unique, things that add to MK's name, and keep that. Like, for example, one thing that I'd like to see return from MK9 is the X-Ray. I think that, in a way, is better than Fatal Blow in every way possible. I think Fatal Blow is just an X-Ray, but done in a lazy and less enjoyable way when you play the game, in more of a serious manner.
Yeah, no, you make some good points. Again, I repeat, this is more like a subjective matter, unlike, the online stuff that we talked about earlier, because we can all agree we want good online. Like, why would you want bad online, right? But as far as the gameplay elements, as far as what the gameplay mechanics are, it's a little more difficult to assess. For example, I like armor. I consider armor like an invincible Dragon Punch in Street Fighter or even King of Fighters, um, or even like an armor move in Tekken. I don't think I think there's an issue with like safe launching armor. I think that's what people are especially complaining about, especially in MKX, right? That can be balanced and reworked, in my humble opinion. So I don't think armor is inherently bad as a defensive mechanic, especially when a lot of these newer games they're very like they're more offensive based than ever, and we no longer like have invincible backdashes. We no longer have like one like no bar, dragon punches and Shoryuken. So I understand you would handle it differently, which is fine, but I do think armor to me still has a place. The problem is not the armor itself; it's stuff like launching armor. It's safe and it's a footsie destroyer. I completely understand that argument. But again, I do like armor in principle. I don't think it's the armor itself that's broken. It's more like the stuff that launches, and if you have too much of it, it's not fun to play against. So I completely understand your perspective in that aspect.
Well, it depends. I'm not saying they shouldn't bring armor launchers. You can have an armor launcher be in the game and it can fit a character. The problem is it depends on what character it's attached to, Like, do we really need Sonya from MK9 throwing out an armor launcher every 5 seconds because she has 1 bar meter? Yeah, like stuff like that. If they can bring back an armor launcher, it just has to be on a character that has a specific style that fits an archetype, right? Like, for example, let's say you have like Grundy from Injustice 1, right? If he were to have an armor launching move, it wouldn't be a big deal, right? Because he's not full screen zoning repeatedly or has some of the best footsies, a character design to get up close, and maybe you can have something like that. And you can have armor work differently too. Like some characters can have different drawbacks to their armor. Like some characters could have 1 hit of armor, some characters have multiple hits of armor, some characters could have armors that only work on projectiles, some characters could have armor that you take double damage when you absorb an attack, things like that. So they can make every character feel very different and unique. They don't have to globalize every character where it's like, well, this is how armor works for everybody. Everybody has 1 hit of armor. Everybody takes normal damage out of armor, and everybody can do armor for 1 bar. I think it's best if they start expanding on characters and making them play differently with mechanics. You don't have to have every character
Yeah,
follow a
to
set
be
of rules.
Havoc, right? Because he has multiple. I don't know how many hits, maybe like 4 or 5, and so does Ashra with her like advancing armor. And then they also added, which is what I like. Like, for example, Kung Lao's armor is no longer safe, like it used to be. But when you spend 2 bars, then it's safe. It's -2. Again, it's for 2 bars. I do like. I think maybe that's the way to go. Again, not for every character. It depends on the character, right? But I feel like maybe that's the direction they should go in. Like all armor unsafe, no exceptions. Like, you spend 1 bar, you're getting punished, period. But maybe for some defensive archetypes, like you suggested, then maybe they get to spend another bar and then it becomes safe. I think that's a good balance, and it works very well for Kung Lao currently. Again, they nerfed his armor, needed to be nerfed because he was just launching and armoring nonstop like pre-patch Tanya. But if you spend 2 bars, then it becomes safe. And again, you still have to use a visor, you just can't spam it, right? Because that's a lot of resources. I believe that's something that can be incorporated in the next, whether it's Mortal Kombat or Injustice game, and it can be balanced.
Yeah, and you mentioning Havoc, I agree. Havoc is actually one of the characters I enjoyed in the beginning. I thought his armor was well done and unique because you have access to this armor attack. It has 3 hits for regular, and I believe the X one had 4 hits. And in doing so, like on paper, it would be like this is kind of silly, right? 3 hitting armor attack that is safe on block. But the way that they designed it is it has short range, and even though it's safe on block, one way Detroit was punishing is when he would read my armor, he would just walk back slightly and then with punishing. So that was something you'd do. So even though in reality it's like a safe armor shouldn't exist, the way that they did Havoc's armor, in my opinion, was good. It was a slow armor attack that takes multiple hits, doesn't have a lot of range, and it can be baited or jumped over and comboed. But when you need to get through something, like let's say he comes in with Kung Lao low hat unblockable, he's jumping in and doing a string. I had a chance sometimes to read that and do my armor, even though sometimes it would get stuffed or he would bait it and punish it. That was fine. So Havoc, surprisingly, one of the characters I enjoyed how they did his armor.
Yeah, they did end up buffing it, but like I don't know. because it's slow as well. But I think they buffed it by like maybe up to 10 frames. But he's still not. I wouldn't still call him an armor character. That move is still very good. Um, but that's what I'm about. Like, I want stuff to be strong and to be usable, but not like, oh my god, he's just doing this. It's brain dead, right? Like, that's what I think we can agree we want to avoid. And we want people to think, okay, like I actually have to make a decision to go for this because, whether it's unsafe or it costs a lot of resources, or maybe a mixture between those two aspects, or any other aspect. I think that's the way to balance this stuff. But yeah, if you're just like spamming armor nonstop, like certain characters did in MKX, it's not fun to watch. It's not fun to play against, and we don't want stuff like that. And I think MKX went a little bit too far. Granted, the game needed that maybe because what the game was, and I'm not sure we want games to play like that again. But and I would honestly say the same thing. Like if Run were to return, I wouldn't mind it at all. But maybe make it cost more resources because we don't just want people running nonstop. Like it's like at that point, like why even have the stamina bar? And maybe I see this a lot in Ultimate. Like it's just like nonstop running. Which, by the way, the stamina bar, I believe, replenishes even faster in that game than it does in MKX. I know it's an old game, obviously. I'm not saying patch it, but it's just like, can we actually? What's the decision here? Like, what's like? There's no decision making. You just use it nonstop. Like, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, the run in UMK3 does come back quicker than MKX. I believe in UMK3 it comes back in 1 second. In MKX, a little bit longer than that. But the difference is in UMK3, there's not a half screen normals attached to when you're running, which
True.
in UMK3 for characters you got to get really close to get your attacks off. And in that game, other components are attached to running. Like if you do a combo or a launch or whatever, you lose your run meter. Whereas MKX, that doesn't happen. In MKX, you can launch someone, do a full string on block, and you still keep your run meter. So they work differently in both games. But in terms of running, I've never been a fan of having running because I think when you have a movement in game be very basic to do and easy, it kind of makes the overall game feel a little bit less appealing than it could be if it didn't have something like that.
Yeah, I personally like the run cancels for certain characters. I know a lot of like Scorpion players, they like their, what it was, a fireball cancel, and then a lot of the Johnny Cage players like their cancels. I know the frame data, ladies and gentlemen, was like probably a little bit too off, right? It was too oppressive. And again, but that can be always, managed more appropriately. Uh the thing is, I think there was some execution involved in that, and I want to promote that, right? We want stuff that's not necessarily super difficult, but think there's some stuff to practice, which is what we talked about earlier. Some stuff when you go into practice, you practice more than combos, and that's why I personally liked it. I could never do it consistently because I just use Tremor, but like for people who want that type of style, I feel like that was one of the few things about MKX that it at least requires some type of execution instead of the repetitive and monotonous 50-50 mix-ups and armor attacks.
Yeah, well, to go off what you said, I don't think you necessarily need run to have cancels. You could have cancels without running. Like, for example, if you wanted to have Scorpion, you can make it so you can cancel his fireball, or have Johnny cancel his certain strings or whatever. Like how you can his back two in MK9. So you don't have to have like run in the game to have cancels because there's other characters that can do that.
Yeah, good. That's a good point. I just think in this day and age, considering how spectators view zoning and defensive archetypes, you have to have strong movement. And I understand it doesn't have to be running. I know exactly what you're saying. Maybe it can be like dash blocking, like it was in Mortal Kombat 9. But I feel like having strong mobility is almost a must in the current FGC meta, right? That's why Street Fighter 6 has a driver, which is essentially a running mechanic. It's a running mechanic that's tied to the drive gauge, which is essentially your stamina, right? Your stamina bar. You don't get to do it as much as obviously in Ultimate or MKX, but in principle, that's what it does. And I feel like you kind of have to have something like that. And we can agree to disagree. Is it skillful or not? Probably it's not. And a lot of people don't like it, but again, I'm not necessarily justifying this, guys. I'm just telling you like how if you were getting paid, NRS hires like, make a fighting game that's going to sell and make it appealing to watch. You cannot have a gameplay like Injustice 2. You just cannot. And by the way, you guys know me. I got top 8 with Freddy, right? At Evo. Like, I'm the defensive player. I'm the zoning player. I'm just telling you what's likely to happen rather than, our idealistic views that will never be implemented. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I feel movement is very important in games. Like being able to identify, like there's some games out there you can watch, just see like 10 seconds of someone playing. You can instantly tell how good or bad they are at the game by how they move. Movement
Yeah,
is
like
kind of them.
Tekken, right?
Yeah, they kind of express themselves. The problem with the run button is that it doesn't matter if you're seeing someone play MKX that's running at you that picked up the game yesterday, or someone who's playing MKX on year 8 running at you. They both look the same. They're running from point A to point B. You see how there's no expression there? The reason why I prefer games to have very in-depth movement, or having it be interesting, like having a block dash or having a wave dash or having some kind of advanced movement stuff, is like if you watch someone play other games, like you're watching Smash Melee, you see people moving, you can see the skill in it. Like, wow, this guy's pretty good at the game. He understands how to move properly. You can watch Tekken, like you said, another example. You can see people moving in and out. They understand how to play the game properly. You can even watch other games, arm fighting games like Counter Strike. When you see people moving, positioning, all that, you're like, this guy's good at the game. Like he understands. When you hit stuff like just walking forward and backwards or just running, you lessen the skill gap massively, the skill ceiling. You lower it because, and that whole component of being able to move and express stuff in the game, it's almost eliminated. Because now you have a game where it's just, you can see anybody walk forward or backwards or see anybody run. It's not as expressive and in depth. That's why when it comes to it, if MK13 was to have run or form of block dashing or wave dashing, I would always take the latter instead of just the basic run or the basic walking.
Yes, I think I don't trust modern fighting game developers to implement more execution, to be honest with you. And by the way, I will never suggest or insinuate that, Tekken A, anybody can pick up little Joe, little Johnny picks up Victor now is gonna body knee with 50-50s, and like, I don't believe in that stuff. I think that stuff, a lot of the content, a lot of the current content creators engage in sensationalism and all this unnecessary drama. But I do believe that, yes, fighting games nowadays are generally easier to play, and again, that's by design. As much as I would love to see, I remember like doing Freddy combos, and you do EX spike, and now you have to like block dash, and then you have to just jump at the right time and make sure you don't cross him up. So like, I would love to see that stuff. I think that stuff is legit. It adds depth. It adds execution. It like you keep saying, it gives you something to practice. But with all due respect, man, I don't trust NRS and some of these other fighting game developers to go back to that formula. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, well, the thing with NRS is they're kind of incorporating stuff from the past. They're just putting so much control in it. For example, I remember when MK11 was releasing. Remember when everybody was playing all those open betas and those invites or whatever? And people were tweeting and stuff like, guys, MK9 is back. Same movement as MK9. I'm like, what are these guys talking about? Like, yes, the game has block dashing like MK9, but the way it's done in the game is not like MK9 at all. In MK9, the movement was a lot more fluid and crisp. You could move and glide a lot quicker than you could in MK11. And in MK11, it's also a character case-by-case basis, because in MK9, some characters didn't have very good movement block dashing because they were more clunky. But in MK11, you had some characters like if you were playing Rain or Fujin or Melina or whatever, you were gliding. It was like you were playing MK9. But then a lot of characters, like some of the ones I was playing, like Aaron Black, Noob, and so on, they had their block dashing was so bad and neutered that honestly, most of the gameplay with Aaron and Noob that I played during MK11, I was just walking because their block dashing was so bad. And you could say, yes, this adds character, this adds more depth to characters. It makes them play differently. But I feel like at the base, you have to have every character be able to execute and move fluidly. And then after that, you can kind of start, cranking up the characters that you want to move quicker. I would never make it so, hey guys, look, this is a game where you have wave dashing for everybody, but these characters, wave dashing is so bad, you might as well never do it. You just have to walk. That to me, I think they're doing it bad. So what I would like to see is if they do bring back block dashing, because I know it's in MK12, but again, MK12 is kind of the same issue as MK11, where they brought back block dashing. They have it very controlled so that you can't be as free with it. They have it so you could go a certain speed. And for a lot of characters, honestly, it's probably better just to walk back and with punish. Because I remember when I was trying to block dash for Havoc, I felt like I wasn't really able to move anywhere. It was just better for me to simply walk forward or backwards. And I don't like when the things that are harder to execute and do in a game are the worst option than it is for me to just tap forward or back when that's just more optimal. I think that is just bad. Then why even have block dashing at that point?
Yeah, the thing is with MK12, and this is a lot of people don't like, is, does the game need better movement when you already, because the premise of the game, like you said, if you hold low, Kung Lao low hat, you move around, you essentially get him for free, right? At least on most characters, right? And that obviously has other repercussions, like, it kind of messes with the armor with the footsies, etc., etc. So, do we need a game like that to have even better movement and for characters to even get in easier and mess around with, like zoning and footsies and defensive gameplay? So I think it's complicated and it depends on the game, and it's not an easy solution.
I'll
But
tell you.
if you go ahead,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'll tell you what the issue is for me personally. I think they need to speed the game up dramatically. I'm not saying MK12. MK12 can stay the way it is, right? They already established it. They patched it. I wasn't there for what they did, but I'm saying for MK13, they need to redesign Mortal Kombat. It needs to go back to being fast. Here's why these new games can't have good movement: because the entire game plays too slow. You cannot have a game with fast, fluid, quick movement, but then the string system is slow as hell. The projectiles are slow as hell. Even the combos are slow as hell. What they have to do for MK13, in my opinion, is create a really good movement system where the game feels fluid and fast. Then after they do that, they need to go to the combos, make the combos be fast, fluid, and quick, make the strings be fast, fluid, and quick. The entire game has to feel very fast. I don't know why I'm doing like a string with Havoc in MK12. I'm doing back 224. I input back 224 in like a second, but then on the screen, I'm seeing back 2 2 4. Then I do 4 4 to 1 2 2, and I'm saying 4 1 2. Like everything is just slow and drawn out. Even Johnny, who has similar strings from MK9, they're in MK12, but they're like so slow. Like you're seeing Johnny do, 4 3 3 or whatever. In MK9, it was like 4 3 3, quick, like you're done. In MK12, it's like 4 3 3. You have all this long time to hit confirm, all this long time to see you block something. It's like cinematic, like you're watching a movie. I don't want to feel like I'm watching something. I want to feel like I'm playing something that's responsive, something that when I press down, my character ducks. When I do a string, my character does string. When I jump, I jump. Like I don't want the game to feel like I jump in there and I'm floaty jump. Everything is so slow. I do a special move. There's like 10 frames startup, then 40 frames of movie animation, and then 30 frames of us both recovering after it was blocked, even though the move is -2. I don't understand why everything has to be so long and drawn out. I think they really need to go back and make the game fluid from everything. All the animations, all the x-rays, the jumping, the movement, everything has to be sped up.
Ironically, I think this is one of the few things that modern fighting game developers design intentionally, because as you know, now we're like in the cooldown meta, right? In which, like a Street Fighter, if you do a level 3 and you do it, your drive gauge is, replenishing as your opponent's is frozen. Same thing, more or less, right? When MK12, when you're doing a combo, like, well, for both characters, right? There's a cooldown, and let's say you used, I don't know, low hat. Now it's almost back. You finished your combo, and now it's 25% replenished, right? It's almost ready to go. I believe a lot of the stuff is on purpose. Again, not justifying it, but I think it's definitely designed intentionally, deliberately in this respect. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, I do. It feels like the entire game is designed to play at a controlled speed. Like the way that the string system works, the movement, like they understand what they're doing. They're not trying to make any of the game feel like at whack or feel like it doesn't belong, right? You like I said, you can't have super fast, fluid movement like Marvel vs. Capcom 3, where people are like, I'm sorry, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, where people are like triangle dashing all this, but then the strings are like MK11 strings, where you do a string and then you're stuck in like a business day on watching every frame play out on the screen, and then you go back to quick movement, right? It wouldn't make sense. They would have to just redesign everything from ground. And like you said, they have specific cooldowns on characters to match the game speed. Because obviously, if you make the game super fast, then waiting 5 seconds for a cameo attack would then feel too long because that's how fast and fluid the game is. But I mean, this isn't stuff that can't be tweaked, though. They would just have to make everything quicker. And I'm not saying just dial up the game and make everything fast with thinking, right? You have to design the game and make it feel right. You can't just make every move 1 frame startup with 1 frame active, 1 frame recovery, right? That would be obnoxious. There has to be.
Don't you also think, sorry to interrupt, this is probably related to the fact that when the game is slightly slower, it's a lot easier for the audience to understand what's going on. Whereas if the game were faster, it would be more difficult to understand, like, what the hell just happened? Like 2 seconds passed, and there were like 3 or 4 interactions. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, right? Sometimes, you can maybe point to Marvel, fair enough, but I feel like for the most part, like, dude, when I was watching Marvel, I'm like, what in the world is going on? I don't understand anything that just happened, right? And I don't think developers necessarily want that. They want to be like, oh, look, he's playing Tekken. He activated heat. You can visually tell it's probably the other guy's turn because he's just running in, and at one point he used to be plus 17, blah, blah, blah. Now it's plus 9. But the point is, even Harada talks about it. It's a lot easier for the audience to process what's going on. Again, I'm not justifying any of this. I'm just telling you what the producers, and their staff, what they have in mind when they design these fighting games.
Right. And that goes back to what I said earlier on one of my points where I brought up the game feels like it's cinematic. Like you're playing a movie almost. Like everything is so animated and long and drawn out, and you have all this time to think between strings, and you can see your opponent jump in the air and then, think heavily on what you want to do before they touch on the moon and then get to you. But really, the thing is, they add so many cutscenes on top of this. Like, why do we have so many cutscene animations out? Like, we get thrown. It takes forever to see a throw animation. Then you have someone activating like a fatal blow, a super long out animation. Then you have like the Tekken example. Now you have people going into heat or whatever, and then another cutscene plays out in the game. It's like, how many pauses do we need? But to what you said, it's kind of like they're intentionally doing this to make it more friendly for the casual. Like they want to see, an up close shot of Yoshimitsu glowing an aura while shaking at the screen, and then before doing his devastating attack. I get that. I just wish there was a way for where you could turn off these options, just have the gameplay more fluid without all the cutscenes and stuff. Even though it would change the gameplay, because then when you activate stuff like that, it freezes the game, so you have time to think.
And by the way, to be fair to your point, Super, who is one of the most famous content creators, and at least maybe in the FGC in general, but especially for Mortal Kombat, I believe he has been recently uploading like 2 or 3, like ultimate MK3 matches, and people are generally responding very well. There are some complaints maybe about the jabbing meta, right? About the block jabs, but in generally people they love the pacing. They love, the general rhythm of the match and of the game. People are responding very well to the fast gameplay that you would like to see in modern fighting games.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. And this is kind of surprising, but you would think the older games that came out 20, 30 years ago would play clunky and slow and whatever, right? But for some reason, the games released 20 years ago are more fluid and snappy than the games released today. I don't understand how that is. Because to me, games should be becoming more fluid and more responsive and more quick, and not becoming the opposite of that. Like when you play MK12, it almost feels like you're playing, well, at least for me, because I know people are used to this playstyle, but it feels like you're playing in slow motion. Then when I go back and play like UMP3, I'm like, wow. So what it feels like to be fast and move and do an attack and just have to think, like block a sweep, and have to instantly respond and, do like that stuff isn't really too around in the newer games. I'm not saying they need to just, I'm not saying they need to make the newer games play like the older games. They don't have to do it at all. I'm just wish that they would kind of get away from games becoming slow, because it feels like every game, like MK9 was a little bit slower than older games, and MKX was a little bit slower than MK9, and then MK11 was slower than MKX. Now MK12 is slightly slower than MK11. It's like, I really hope MK13 does not end up playing more slow than MK12,
I think there's definitely a case to be made with what you're saying, and I wouldn't mind seeing, as you suggested, faster strings, faster movement, faster speeds. And maybe we can close out the podcast on this note, because I think we've talked a lot about Mortal Kombat, the current and obviously the older games, but I do want to touch on Injustice as well because I do think you have a lot of interesting stuff to say about this. That game is, especially Injustice 2, Jesus Christ, was essential. Was especially known for its crappy movement. The walk back meta, zoning. I'm all about zoning, but I think it was way too zoning friendly, even for me. Um, what are maybe a couple of things you would focus on changing that franchise to make it a more enjoyable playing as well as viewing experience?
Well, one, I don't understand how Injustice 2 even came out like that because I remember when we were playing Injustice 1, one of the biggest complaints from MK9 to Injustice 1 is why does the game feel so much slower with movement? Why is Grundy jumping in the air and floating like a balloon? Like, what is this? Why not make like in that? Because in MK9, when you jumped in the game, the jumps are fast. That's what people don't tell you. They'll tell you, oh,
Oh
MK9 had
yeah,
easy
yeah, yeah.
anti-airs, this and that. But when someone jumped at you in MK9, they were landing like a second later in your face. Like, it was very quick. Like, you better have the reaction to quickly anti-air them. But in Justice, like, you jump with these characters and it's like everything is slower. And then the movement, the dashes were okay, but like the walking was horrendous. You could not walk in that game. Like, am I
Remember
playing a
Zod's walk?
superhero or am I playing like an 80-year-old grandma? What is this? Seriously, what is this
Remember Zod?
movement?
Remember Zod's walking? Oh my god.
Yeah, I don't even remember his walking because no one ever did it. I've never seen what Zod looked like. I just saw him backdashing the entire time. But seriously, Injustice, this may sound crazy, but these DC Injustice games need to be quicker than even Mortal Kombat. You're playing Superman, you're playing Flash, you're playing all these characters. They need to be fast. You know, buildings should be exploding, should be having these hectic, it should be like a tag game. Like, it should, I don't want to say they need to copy Marvel. That's not what I'm saying. They could obviously have it play in NRS style in their own way, but the games need to be very quick. Like, why is there no super jumping in Injustice? Why is there no like backwards running or forward running? Why is there no like block dashing or wave dashing? Why is there no like air flight, quick movement? Like, we're playing games of superheroes. They should be able to move and do all this stuff. Where are the wall jumps? We're missing so many things. Like, it does not, when I see Superman in the game, it does not look like I'm watching Superman. It looks like I'm watching someone slowly float towards you and then do like a 2-punch attack and then he's blowing his breath at you. I don't think Superman would fight like that in the comics. you know? It would probably be like a DBZ battle if you saw DC fights.
100%. I think that's the first thing I would rectify about Injustice is the movement and the lack of ability. But again, you can still have zoning. You could even better zoning, but man, oh man, Injustice 2, that's not the way to do it. You need to have strong movement. And I'm sure we will have a disagreement in the future podcast about, do we have runs? Do we have this? As we already had. But 100%, they need to correct that. It's urgent. That's the number one thing about the game. Like you said, we're playing superheroes. Why is Superman moving like that? Also, why is Superman just doing one string and over again? Like, what?
Into his breath. Like, is that really how Superman would
Yeah,
fight up close? like,
yeah. It's like, yeah, it doesn't
but
make any sense at all.
just to quickly touch on the zoning thing before we wrap this up, the zoning also doesn't have to be slow and funky. You can have fast, fluid, fun zoning. Like, for example, why do we have to have it so like if Superman does a laser, you have to watch the animation or block it. Then there's like 50 frames of okay, you block the laser, and then you have to wait for it to get meter burn. Why not have everything just be quick and fast and snappy? Like, for example, let's say you have a character like Zod, right? He throws a projectile at you. It doesn't have to be a projectile coming at you, and then when it hits you, it launches you in the air for like 100 frames. This long animation. Why not have it be like the projectile's fast, it hits you, you go up in the air for like 20 frames, like super quick, and you fall to the ground. So it's fast, snappy, and then on block, it can have way less block stunts that you both move quicker. The move can be made quicker so that it just feels more responsive. Not everything has to be like slow and dragged out because that makes the overall game just feel bad to play, especially when the movement feels bad. So you can have good movement and it can match the speed of the game. I mean, I'm sorry, you can have good zoning match the speed of the game while also having things like, good frames on block, hit, and width while making the game still feel fluid. We don't need to have projectiles where you get hit by like a dead shot, quick projectile, and then your character's stuck stumbling back for like 150 frames. Like, we don't need that. You can stumble back for like 10 frames. It's very quick. You got hit like quickly with a wrist tap, and that's it. That way the game feels very fluid. Now he has fast zoning, but when you get hit by it, you're not stuck in like an hour of animation. You see what I'm saying?
Dude, I have stuff to say about this. The zoning in a lot of NRS games is completely brain dead, and they need to, creatively speaking, they need to come up with more interactions. It just cannot be, oh look, this character spams this projectile that has the recovery of a jab, and that's it. It's just like, what? Like, no. Some recent zoning characters that I appreciate, like Poison, in Poison and Street Fighter Five, is very original. Doesn't even have a projectile. She's like a mid-range, like 3/4 screen zoner. Very interesting to play. Like super interesting. Manat as well, to a lesser extent. Those are the type of designs I would like to see. Especially obviously as I'm getting older. I've seen this stuff already. I don't want to spam one move over and over again. It's boring. It's super boring for the player, super boring for the audience watching. And there's also nothing to practice with a lot of times with these characters. I want to see like more interaction. You want to zone, give me like 5, 6 projectiles, and you kind of have to like think how you're gonna use them. Uh, from the deep with Aquaman, that's like the worst thing you can do. One move tracking, doing everything. Like at least make it like have like 4 or 5 different versions, right? Like why is this just like so brain dead? Are you with me on this?
Yep, and then on top of that, when you block from the deep, it has blocky. I'm sorry, it has clunky block stun, where you guys are just both stuck for like a lot of time. What's funny is during Injustice 2, one of my nerfs for Aquaman was the way to nerf from the deep is remove it being one move you just spam that automatically tracks, and make it so you have 4 different versions you have to choose and select. That way, it's more interesting if you're playing against opponent without having enough frame that on a move, but you can make it so now you have to read movement. And with the game's movement being better, now I'm in a sweet spot where it's like, well, are you going to do medium far try and rush or medium close try and rush? I may move forward, I may move back. Like you see how there's more thought involved, and now it's more creative for both players engaging. It's more fun overall than him just doing one. I have to just walk up, block. It's just like you
That's
said,
how
the zoning's
Freddy's
very repetitive and boring. Even the projectiles, it's like just do one projectile over and over, and that's it.
just real quick for the people who may not know, like that's how Freddy's more or less how Spike was, right? And the interaction
Yes.
was quicker, and you had to actually choose, and that's interesting. So now as a zoner, I have to make a decision, and guess what? You make a decision, and they space out, and yeah, you're gonna get punished. That's on you. So that's how you design a zoner. Make it more interactive, make it more interesting, give us various options. Is how you come up with these interesting designs instead of, oh, wrist shot, wrist shot, wrist shot from the deep, from the deep, from the deep, or low gunshot, like, right? Like, come on, man. Like NRS is capable of a lot better than some of the previous
Yeah,
design.
they can get way more creative and engaging on a lot of creating unique, interesting zoning characters. And I may get blown up for this, but I think one of the most creative zoners they made was Martian Manhunter. I know the character was broken. I do not think he should have a safe overhead teleport or half screen normals you can mash. But I'm saying if you were to look at that character, only look at his zoning tools, like his orbs, not his meter burn orb so much, but his regular orbs. He had 4 orbs to choose from: close, medium, far, and very far. The way they worked was very unique. You would put them out after 2 seconds, they would explode, create a hitbox. You could create frame traps with it. You could create like a course where your opponent has to try to get past to get to you. It was interesting. And then he had the pillars. He had 4 different ones, like from the deep, but you had to choose. Then he had the sky shots. You had to close, medium, far. They could do stuff like that for characters and then expand on that, make it have more depth and more this instead of having, a character that's just spamming one projectile repeatedly in a boring way where it covers everything. You gotta give characters different unique projectiles to use, different ways to master them, how they have to choose their range to use them. And you want zoning characters to play different from each other. You don't want a lot of zoning characters to boil down to, well, who has the most spammable projectile, and you just do that over and over. These are the better characters, and you pick them.
Yeah, I also like JP in Street Fighter 6. I think is another good example. Because he doesn't really have any like horizontally, projectile that are spammable, horizontal projectiles. It's more about, he does have kind of like a from the deep, uh, but he's forced to like slow you down with these portals, and again, it's a lot more interesting than just having, you know, tiger shot, wrist shot, like over and over again. It's not really at this point, dude. I'm old and I want to play something different. I'm not, in the camp of, let's give me this projectile that I want to spam. Been there, done that. Give me interesting designs. Give me something more creative that's actually going to engage me instead of having these boring, designs that end up being broken anyway, and then you guys nerf them, and then they end up being crap. It's just like, okay, enough.
Yeah, and just to say this, because I don't want it to seem like I don't want them to have any kind of spam machine gun zoning. I think it's okay to have stuff like that, but limit it to like one or two characters out of the cast. The other characters can do other stuff. But like if you want to have like a Serena character or a Cabal character, that's fine. That could be their
Correct.
thing of how they zone. But please do not make most of the characters in the game that zone just do that. Like we do not need 10 characters doing instant air fireballs, but then the one that is the best is the one that just does it quicker, right? And that's kind of boring. Characters should have their own identity and how they play the game and how they incorporate zoning and apply it to people. So it's fine to have machine gun zoning, like you said, just limit it to like one or two characters out of the cast. The other zoners in the game could do completely different things to make them unique. You can have character zoners that wall you out. You can have mid-screen zoners that, summon stuff to keep you in a certain place. You could have zoners that place traps or, they can get so creative. There's so many fighting games that do interesting stuff like that.
I agree 100%. And hopefully in the future podcast, as we wrap it up here soon, we can actually talk about, maybe we can spend half of a podcast talking about how we would design a zoner. And I know you like trapping much, so you can talk about, how we would handle trapping with certain characters. Because I know you played Hunter Predator, right? In MKX, he was one of your favorite characters in that game. So I think we can, maybe give these developers some ideas. Not that we have all the answers, we don't, but you guys can give us feedback and let us know how you would, design characters. We can talk about it on the podcast, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep, I agree. And with that said, let's wrap it up here. I appreciate so much for coming on, Dave. Hopefully, guys, for the next episode, we will have either Tom Brady or Crimson appear if they're free to do it. And yes, thank you guys so much for watching. Please let us know your feedback and if you have any questions. Thank you again.